"I'll get it," shouted my wife Sue, coming up the stairs. She was about to answer the doorbell. Apparently, she thought I was upstairs, not reading an ebook in an unlit room. I started to get up since I was only a few feet from the front door, but when she said she would do it, I laid back down. I've only lived here for a couple weeks. It was unlikely the knock was meant for me. "Oh, what do you want?" There was contempt in my wife's voice. "I need to pay the boys' child support for the next 3 months. If I could, I'd like to get them Christmas presents." Obviously, the reference was to Mike Lawrence, Sue's recent ex. "Well, you can't. It's not a good time. You can pick them up this weekend and give them presents then." "Sue, be reasonable. You know I don't have a car. I lost my car when you fired me." "Mike, let's not dig into the past. It's the past. We're divorced. You have visitation rights, and I'll make sure the boys are always available on that schedule. But they are getting used to a new man in the house. It will be confusing for them if you spend time with them too. Make arrangements for them to come to your new home." "Well, that's just the thing. I don't have a home. I'm forced to go out of town. This is my only chance to see the boys. Please, we had good years together until you decided to move on. Let me see my boys. This will be my last chance for a while." "I'm sorry, but no." I had to think fast. There was nothing common in what I heard. I couldn't imagine my wife denying her children a visit with their father. I stepped out of the foyer. The front door, as it opened, blocked the view into the room. I quickly stood up and asked, "Why is the door open?" I walked into the foyer and saw my wife standing blocking her ex from entering the house. "Oh, Mike, aren't you? I'm Larry Compton. I'm sorry, I fell asleep and didn't hear the doorbell ring. Why don't you invite him in, Sue?" Sue looked at me as if I had peed on her shoes. "I'll handle it, dear," she said through clenched teeth. "Oh, I'm sure you're handling it. But regardless of your past, that man can come inside. It's cold." Sue took a step back, letting him through the door, but still effectively blocking the entrance to the house. Mike stepped inside and stepped aside, and I closed the front door. Sue's stance suggested that I still had some work to do. "Boys!" I shouted toward their bedrooms. "Your daddy's here." It's an amazing thing about children. Verbal communication is easy to hear if they like the topic, and easy to hear if they don't. In an instant, both of them were out of their rooms, down the stairs, and hugging their father. Sue looked on as if her current marriage was unlikely to last long if her husband didn't wise up. Mike struggled to hold the boys, a wrapped box in each hand. "What are these boxes?" the youngest boy, Billy, asked. Even at 6 years old, he knew that today was December 21st, and that 2 boxes plus 2 brothers were presents. For the first time in my limited, to 2 meetings, including this one, interaction with Mike, I saw his eyes light up. He had a plan. "These are your Christmas presents, boys. I was hoping to hand them to you early." He looked at Sue. Both boys stared at their mother. "Can we open them now, Mom?" Tom, too old to be Tommy at 10 years old, said. Sue looked like she was lost in the desert. Obviously, the answer was one, yes. She didn't want to say it, but she couldn't think of anything else to say. I decided that since there was no way I could hurt myself more, she was already mad at me. So why not? "Sure, boys, that's a great idea. Why don't you go to the family room? Sue, could you make them some hot chocolate and give Mike a cup of coffee?" Nah. She knew she wouldn't look bad if she said anything else and smiled warmly. "What a wonderful idea. We can all sit around and watch them open it." "No, I think I'll escort them to the family room, and when you've gathered your drinks, I'll go back to my book. It's time for the 4 of you now." Sue hesitated, but turned and went into the kitchen. The boys went the other way, through the dining room, into the family room. Mike walked with them. I grabbed his hand. He turned to me. "Mike, I heard your conversation. I have a condominium about 4 blocks from here. Do you know Carling Towers?" "Sure. I'll leave you a key and a note on the porch as you leave. Please take it and spend the night there. I want to talk to you in the morning." I don't understand why Sue didn't let you in. Will you do it? No, Larry. I don't like charity from a wife snatcher. Mike, I promise you it will cost you money, and it won't involve charity. I'll leave a key and a note. At least read the note. Promise me. Look, I have a few minutes to be with my boys. Let me do that. After all, without your help, I wouldn't have either. I'll read your note. We walked to the family room. Mike got settled in with the boys, and Sue was almost done with the drinks and cookies. I went back to my room. I sat down at the computer. I didn't have much time to write a note. Mike, I overheard your conversation with Sue. It's very disturbing. We need to talk. My idea of who you are has changed dramatically. I don't know how long your denouement will last. So I have to take this note to the porch quickly. Let me say this. I would never knowingly steal a man's wife. I'm told your marriage is over, and it was over long before Sue and I began our romantic relationship. I heard you quit your job to be away from her. You have no reason to believe me. But if you have no place to stay, enjoy my warm apartment for the night. Talk to me tomorrow morning around 8 and tell me I'm full of shit if you believe that. At least you'll have a good night. Use any of the bedrooms. I don't know what's in there from food and drink, but you're allowed everything. Larry. I printed out the document, took the envelope, put the key and note in it, and put it on the last step from the porch. The porch was 3 steps above the yard. I was sure Mike would see the note as he left, but Sue wouldn't see it from the door. I saw no chance of Sue walking him out. I could have written a longer note. It took the boys over an hour to get through the visit. I hope the note had enough information. Tonight's temperature was expected to drop tens of degrees. If the note didn't convince him, hopefully homelessness plus the note will. Shit, shit, shit. This is exactly what I was worried about. Sue is my second wife. We've only been married a few weeks, since the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Her divorce was finalized a few days earlier. My first wife and I met in college, she at Penn State and I at the Wharton School of Business. We fell in love, got married, and settled into a beautiful home in the country. We lived in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but most of my business was conducted in neighboring New Jersey. My business is real estate development. I am great at raising money and bringing people together to revitalize neighborhoods in nearby communities such as Newark, Trenton, Camden, and so on. I have a gift for organizing these deals. We lived in affluence. Jane majored in education. She went to college because that was what you did after high school. She chose education because of her love of children. That's just a polite way of saying she was looking for a husband. Truth be told, she was a bit of an uncontemporary person. She believed that being a wife and mother was as high an accomplishment as any other occupation. When we met, I was struck by her atavistic views. But she was smart, funny, charming, beautiful, and a wonderful lover. Add to that the fact that she wanted to be a mother and a homemaker, for me, and she was irresistible. We were the perfect couple. The problem was that I would often leave the house on Monday morning and return late on Friday. Week after week, with no end in sight. And then tragedy struck. And my wife and our daughter were murdered in our home by drug addicts in search of another batch of drugs. Our home had elaborate security measures in place, but Jane had not put them in place. She tried to set off the panic alarm, which led to the murder of my 2 beautiful girls. Because I was chasing success, I had no help. Because I was so successful, I needed to be there to help. My pursuit of success led to me not paying attention to her insensitivity to safety. My failure caused her death. It gnawed at me that I had chosen a 1950s marriage, more than half a century too late. Of course, that's what Jane wanted, but I let her live that life. In that era, people were safe at home. Jane and I created wonderful lives for ourselves within the walls of our home. Jane insulated herself from the harsher realities of our time. We lived in an affluent neighborhood with large wooded lots and houses standing far from the road. Our house was not visible from the road, which made her feel safe. It also allowed the drug addicts to feel secure in a robbery attempt. No one knew about the break-in until she set off the burglar alarm. This alerted the police, but caused the wild-eyed junkie to shoot her, and then our daughter. I was broken. All I had left was a job. I started striving for more, stronger and faster. I didn't seek a second wife. I didn't think it was fair. Instead, I used my wealth to find temporary life partners. I was happy chasing, catching, and discarding. It didn't work for me, but in the short term it was fine. Then I met Sue. The people in the lobby interrupted my musings. The boys were excited and wished their father a good night and a Merry Christmas. Sue was being polite and doing her best to get her ex out the door. Finally, she succeeded. When he left, Sue led the boys upstairs to bed. His eyes were red. He was on the verge of tears. I motioned to talk to him, but he squeezed past me. I said, pointing at him, "First step." He left the house and walked down the stairs, passed the envelope but stopped, stood a moment, turned, picked it up, tucked it into his coat pocket, and walked off into the night. There was nothing common in this visit. The night is very cold. His wife's ex-wife comes on foot, wearing a jacket hardly suitable for this weather. He just wants to see his children, and if it weren't for my intervention, he would have been sent away. I'll ask Sue for an explanation. She came down the stairs in annoyance. "Why did you go against my wishes to keep the man out of our house?" She didn't quite shout. Now I had a decision to make. She told me that her ex had quit his job. He said he had been fired. I was hoping to talk to him tomorrow. I needed to get as much information from her as possible. Should I tell her about my plans or go for the deception? When in doubt, lie. What do you mean? How do I know you don't want the boy's father in the house? I added in a tone similar in emotion and volume to hers. You heard what I said. Oh, that's what you think. In fact, I didn't hear it. I was asleep in my chair. The cold air woke me up, and I got up to see why the door was open. Her tone changed. You didn't hear our conversation? Why? What are you hiding or trying to hide? Her tone became defensive. How dare you? I'm not hiding anything. I just thought you heard and knew that I didn't want him to come and invited him anyway. I shook my head, smiling. I spoke much softer. You know me better than that. We need to tone it down a few decibels. Let's get a glass of wine, sit down and talk. If there's some reason you don't want your ex around your boys, I want to know more about it. I went to get the wine. I had a bad feeling about this. Everything was so wonderful. Sometimes things are perfect, but in my experience, nothing is perfect. I agonized for almost 2 years. I experienced only 2 emotions, overwhelming sadness and emptiness from my inadequacy. I followed 2 treatment regimens. To get rid of the sadness, I worked insane amounts of hours, and to get rid of the emptiness, I found companionship. Being successful, I could find a companion whenever I wanted. Almost all the women I dated were content with 1 or 2-time affairs. I didn't feel guilty about using them because they were using me too. As dissatisfied as I was with this messy existence, it relieved the emptiness and gave me the illusion of adequacy. I vowed that if I ever got another chance, things would have to be radically different. So I tolerated those hedonistic evenings. When I first met Sue, we had a great evening. I hadn't spoken to anyone in almost 2 years. Sure, business connections and seductions, but no talking. Funny enough, it wasn't so much conversation per se. Sue would tell me about what she was doing, and I would tell her about what I was doing. But somehow, by describing what we were doing, we were talking about who we are. More than that, we were showing how similar we were. We talked for a few minutes before we introduced ourselves to each other. When she said her name was Sue Lawrence, I asked if she was related to Mike Lawrence. Her expression changed and she replied, "Only by marriage?" and paused. She became uncomfortable. Since I wasn't looking at her in a carnal sense, I didn't continue. We ended the evening with a handshake. I don't date married women, not even for one evening. She didn't make it clear that she would have accepted the proposal had I made it. I thought this Riesling would be good, I said, holding out my glass to her. I apologize if I sounded offensive. She paused, exhaled, and looked directly at me. No, I apologize for being defensive. I don't like my behavior and I apologize. It's more like the Sue I married. Tell me why you don't want him in the house for Christmas? Boys have a hard time adjusting as it is. When we were both busy, they didn't have many parents, but when Mike fell on hard times, it did them good. We never talked about him. What do you mean, hard times? The reason I asked Sue if she was related to Mike Lawrence when we first met was that I was researching him as a potential business partner. Mike was a man whose skill set seemed useful to me. I had researched some of the best people in town. Mike was the best choice for me. Then there was Sue, and to avoid complications, I crossed Mike off my list. Sue continued. Mike was the manager of the Vegas casino, hotel, and area stores. When the casinos went into decline and the upscale town collapsed, he lost his job. The parent company wanted to move him to their top hotel in Las Vegas, but I had just been promoted to vice president of sales and didn't want to go. As a result, he was left with nothing he could do or had experience in, with a salary close to what he was making. Since he stayed, wasn't that a huge commitment for you and the boys? Huge commitment or sacrifice? That was the question. He always made more money than I did, and my promotion put me on the same level as him. My promotion was significant, and his demotion, well, it was devastating. He couldn't find his new role. And you fired him? Well, it was stupid, I said. I was asleep and didn't hear anything. Maybe she wouldn't notice. Yeah, he worked 3 levels below me and wasn't a salesman. We couldn't have handled it in a marriage, let alone a divorce. She paused for half a second. Damn, she'd caught my mistake. But she continued. Apparently, she had decided not to call me that. Damn. I'm trying to get her to be honest, and now I'm being told about something I said I overslept on. On the positive side, she has admitted to firing him. I suspect I would have said he quit too. Why show that you are callous to your new husband? On the other hand, I have to be honest if I want her to be. I wonder what she would think about the possibility of him staying to work with me. A top-notch casino manager, he has experience in all things casino. Just the kind of person a real estate developer could use. He's already got something going on. Let him go. Her statement was too quick and dismissive. This was about getting rid of him, not helping him use his talents. I guess that was okay. She didn't care about him anymore. What about your boys? I don't know. I guess you're right. You and him working together scares me. Well, it does. I can't say I feel any different. But I've been limited in what I can do without a strong operative. Perhaps he is just that. There was a sense of rightness in her answers. She wasn't trying to deceive, and in fact, let me off the hook when she caught me being less than truthful. I needed to hear from her ex. I wondered if he would talk to me. He called me a misogynist. He thinks I had something to do with her deciding their marriage was over. I might not even find him tomorrow. Sue passed that test, but I missed my chance to find out more. She smiled and hugged me. You're sweet. I noticed it right away. This tough businessman has a soft core. It would be great for the boys if he lived here in town. If he's right for you, that would be even better. How did what she had just told me relate to my own memories? The first time we met, we made it work. She was wearing her wedding and engagement rings, so I didn't flirt. But we found common ground. I was relatively new in town and was here because of the recent decline of casinos in town. It was a fad, but the bad eastern weather had brought the big money back to Vegas. We met at a bar across the street from the headquarters of the manufacturing company she worked for. She was vice president of sales. I didn't get back to that bar until a month later. Of course she was there. She was ringless that time. We had a brief conversation about her marriage coming to an end. She was worried about herself and her sons. What did she say? I don't remember. I think there was a lot of emotion in her voice and the words were not so disturbing. I think she said her husband had lost his job. It was at a casino hotel. Then he was working for her. Why didn't she mention that? On the other hand, I can't recall us ever discussing anything substantial about her marriage. We talked about our future, not her past. Sue was the first woman I met who seemed to be able to heal the tear in my heart. The fact that Jane stayed home and lived for her marriage and child made her vulnerable. Sue had no such vulnerability. I was sick of one-night stands and a long line of nameless women. They didn't deserve it. Hell, I didn't deserve it. And until I met Sue, I just couldn't help myself. Sue was going to be my way back. I went from conquest to dating only one woman as often as I, or she, could. For us, the frequency of dating could be 3 days in a row and then not repeat for 3 weeks. During the time we were dating, on 2 occasions we managed to meet while on different business trips. I fell madly in love with both Sue and the very idea of Sue. She was independent, self-sufficient, goal-oriented, not to mention completely uninhibited in bed. Funny stuff, but that's what our relationship was. I was so excited to meet a woman who was so different from my late wife. The more I got to know Sue, the less I was tormented by memories of Jane. At first, it was all about our business side. Come to think of it. At first, I saw her as a great businesswoman who was interesting to talk to about building an empire. She took the first steps towards us becoming something more. She didn't need to be seduced. I was in a bad place. Was she doing badly too? Or was I a good step up from the underachieving husband? I'm good at what I do because I look at everything with jaundiced eyes. Are those really the eyes I want to use now? She has now admitted that she fired him after he told me he quit. What else? Sue, this is no way to celebrate our first Christmas. Santa left you a present in my underwear. Santa? And what makes you think such an act is my gift? She said, caressing him. Maybe you're the one who's going to get the gift. Well, I can see that this discussion is going to take a lot of time and effort. Are you sure you're up for it? It sounds like it's your job. I guarantee I can handle mine. We retired to the bedroom and made every effort to find out who had gotten the gift. Nothing could be found out, but by morning, neither of us had the energy left to look any further. Why are you up so early? Sue hugged me, and I couldn't get up without waking her. Early meeting. Larry, you don't know anyone who meets so early in the morning. What's the matter? Sue, I want to discuss a new operating idea. With my ex-husband. Oh crap. Marrying a smart man is bound to have a downside. She guesses it by what time I get up. Well, yeah, sorry it scares you. That's it? You want to know about him and me? Now it's time for sleight of hand or mouth. Sue, last night this guy called me a wife snatcher. I don't think he's interested in discussing his past wife's marital problems with me. True statement. Of course, I was going to do my best to change his mind. Larry, you know that if you dig into our past, his story will be different from mine. What are you going to do then? You act like I want to find something wrong with our marriage. Why would I want to do that? Your ex knows everything I need to accomplish the grand regressive development that is the old casino district. Don't worry about it. She didn't seem satisfied with that less than complete answer. I decided it was time to kiss her goodbye and see what I could learn from her ex. And she asked me what I would do when I realized that his story and hers didn't match. The question was very important because there was no way their stories could match. Even if they tried to tell the same story, they wouldn't succeed. So, since they have different interests, I know I'm going to get different stories. What am I supposed to do? Start a new marriage, doubting my wife. Maybe I'm better off not knowing. Well, that's just silly. Sticking my head in the sand gets me in trouble. Head in the sand is face down and ass up. I can imagine what I'm subject to. How can I justify not knowing anything else? I'm stuck. I don't want to know more and am compelled to know more. I keep coming back to the fact that I'm successful in business because I'm a skeptic. I don't take anything at face value. On the other hand, how can a new marriage be successful because of skepticism? One thing I pride myself on is determination. And this back and forth thinking is nothing decisive. Shit, or get out. I entered the apartment through the door connecting the garage and laundry room. This open room adjoined the kitchen, where Mark sat at the table drinking coffee. There was an empty silverware plate on the table. Apparently, he had found something for breakfast. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound as chipper as possible. He stared at me. "Good morning," without enthusiasm. "You'll forgive me. I have an intense hatred for you that spills out when I try to be grateful for the last 12 hours. Okay?" I asked rather than said. "Let me start like this. I never had a relationship with your wife until she stopped wearing rings and announced that divorce was around the corner. If you think otherwise, then we need to work on how I can convince you that what I'm saying is true, or how you can convince me that something else is true. Agreed?" He looked stern but not withdrawn. "You're making me nervous standing here. I know adversarial meetings. Get some coffee, sit down, and you and I will try to figure out what we need from each other. Do you agree?" I didn't answer. I poured coffee into my mug and sat down. He's experienced. His face warmed without a smile. "That's better. First of all, I can't thank you enough. Sue wasn't going to let me see my boys, and I'm leaving here tonight. I only have a couple dollars left and a small personal credit card, almost maxed out. I was worried about how to get to the motel and whether the card would allow me to spend the night. If not, I was walking to the airport. No matter how cold it was, I could freeze to death. You're a bright, successful guy. How did you get into this situation?" I could see the wheels turning. He pondered what to say. "Before I answer, let's shake hands and agree to be honest with each other. I won't hold you to your first statement. You made it before we agreed." I immediately extended my hand. "I swear I will be honest with you. My earlier statement still stands. I now give you my word that that statement was true as well. It may take us some time to believe each other. Liars swear to tell the truth. But this is a great start. I thank you for the offer." We shook hands. A very firm handshake from each of us. We looked at each other as if that might help us see the truth. An observer might believe we were both honest. I wasn't sure, and I knew he felt the same way. But it was a start. I kept looking at him. If he doesn't play poker, he certainly has the face for it. He continued. "I don't want to talk about why I'm here. I'll tell you the last verse. I've been unemployed for almost 2 months. I rented a cheap apartment, was one day late on my payment, and the landlord wanted to kick me out. The move involves all my money. I really want to keep my sons, but I can't let my life fall apart further." "Your life fell apart?" "Look, this is embarrassing. I won't go into details. I fell apart when I lost my job." He said it with air quotes. "I needed support, and this bitch stuck a knife in my back and started trading as fast as she could. I decided to be honorable and did too much to take care of my sons and was left with nothing and no income. I was a brave martyr, drowning in equal parts self-pity and Tanqueray until the weather turned cold. I didn't realize people had a limited sense of humor about those with no income or possessions. You are an enigma. You don't know it, but in my work as a developer, I do a lot of due diligence. I want to take on a huge project in the casino district. As part of that project, I'm going to need a partner. I have checked out several people who have held high positions, and you were one of them. I was very impressed with what I learned. People like you don't usually become homeless." His back straightened. "Screw you. My type doesn't usually have his wife stolen. Your type does." He's so serious that I have to remember it's not a lack of emotion, but the ability to mask it. "I see. I apologize for that. We should leave it alone. I accept that. You are free to question me, but I continue to assure you, I pursued the woman who told me she was no longer attached to him." He shook his head. "She filed for me right before Halloween, then fired me 2 days later. I didn't contest it, gave her almost all the material possessions, and the boys all my share of the money. The divorce was finalized in 30 days. Unless you started stalking her in the early days of November, she was very much married." From the look on his face, he's telling the truth. I have to tell him my truth or he'll leave. I wasn't wrong in my calculations. This is the guy I need. We met right after the first of the day. It was just a meeting between coworkers, no different from the way you and I met. I saw her again about a month later. She wasn't wearing a ring. We dated as a couple since March, and in April we became lovers. A whole 6 months. She was planning her exit strategy, and I'm not sure you weren't planning with her. I'm not going to repeat the mistake of last night. We swore an oath of honesty. I'm going to be honest. Mike, I'm looking at the opposite side of the same coin. Why was she holding on to her marriage and at the same time pursuing me? Could there be a legitimate reason? He heeded those words. It could mean he'd bought it. It could mean he was mulling it over. Let me switch. If Sue wasn't complicating things, my background check shows you're the guy I want to work with. What if we move on? Why the hell would I want to work with you? Well, in order of importance, I'm here in town, and so are your guys. And then there's this opportunity. You can make enough money in a few years to become a rich man. We can develop a big chunk of the city in different ways, each supporting the other. As I spoke, he leaned forward. The idea intrigued him. A lot. Think more broadly. Why develop individual sites? Develop the city. Bingo. I've hit the mark. He's really passionate about this. I can get to know him professionally. Then I can learn about Sue and him. No one has ever taken on a project of this magnitude before, but I like the sound of it. Can you give me a concept to sell? His eyes lit up. While the city was declining and the casinos were deteriorating, I've been thinking a lot about what I could do. If you give me a month, I can prepare something official. Let me ask you, how much would pay for such a job? Well, that's the thing. Now it's a concept, and in my business, you don't get paid for concepts. I would suggest that you live in this apartment rent-free. I will provide the car. I will pay your expenses and say $1,000 a week. When we have a concept, we'll enter into some sort of partnership, say 60/40ths. His expressionless face changed to pure anger. I apologize. But you took my family away from me, and now you're going to pay me pennies and expenses to develop your business on your word of honor of great rewards. You probably think I've already gone around the bend. I held my hands palms up to him to deflect the emotion. Okay, you got me. Trusting me, with air quotes, is not going to be on the list of things I expect most from my partner. I'll contact my attorney. I will ask him to draw up a contract. I'll provide what I've outlined for now, and you'll retain ownership of your concept. When we meet to analyze it, we'll decide on a partnership. Larry, this is crazy. I have to tell you that I don't like you and I don't trust you. You're talking about a partnership equal in commitment to marriage, and by the way, that's why I don't like or trust you. He paused, shook his head, sighed, and looked directly at me. And yet there's an appeal to that. Tell me why me and why now? Don't pout my ass. Tell me straight. Look, I saw your sons' faces when they came to you. I also saw your face. I realized that if you have a chance to be in the same city, you'll do anything to be with them. I have a feeling about you. You really were my choice until I started having an affair with your ex-wife. I hate to say it, but your story is truer than hers. Maybe we're not contradicting each other. Mike, I have to determine if she and I were made for each other, or if I was a convenient stepping stone on her way up. It couldn't be more personal. I'm sure I can work with you. If it turns out she did you wrong, can you get over her betrayal of you? He smiles. It's a, I know something you don't kind of smile. Sure. Screw it, I promise to be honest. I know she has no chance of not betraying me. Does that mean you betrayed me? Not necessarily. Her betrayal is a fact. Yours is a question. If I realize you've betrayed me, we're in trouble. I liked that. Then, to be honest, I don't see a problem. We looked at each other and silently decided that this was the most appropriate place to end the discussion. I decided to go back to discussing business. Can you tell me about your concept for developing the city? The same twinkle in his eyes as when I met my sons appeared. You've seen the writing on the wall for almost 2 years now. Casino gambling couldn't work here with the scale of development we had. It was a vicious downward spiral. We couldn't attract big enough money. Gambling became smaller. Famous entertainers stopped coming. Expensive stores and restaurants couldn't survive. It was like a train wreck in super slow motion. During that time, I was trying to think how the neighborhood could be saved. I had a great concept. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with gambling or hotels per se, so my company just laughed when I brought it up. Enough with the introductions. Okay, so what's the deal? Our cities are a mess. People are fleeing bad schools, too much pollution, lack of greenery and safety to live in the suburbs. But the suburbs have their own problems too. So what will it take to get people to live in the city again? He counted on his fingers. 1. Great schools, not good or above average. Great. 2. Safety. I mean, being able to walk around at 2 in the morning with a handful of money and not get mugged. 3. Structure appropriate for life in the 21st century. You can do it in a compact neighborhood, but you can't do it in the suburbs. I beg your pardon, but those 3 things are much easier said than done. Talk about pie in the sky. I don't think so. We have to change expectations, but let me put it together, and I think you'll agree. I don't know if I believe that, but he certainly does. After all, the idea doesn't have to work, it just has to sell. The question is, can he give me enough to sell it? As strange as it is to say it, I think our personal problems can be solved by working together. I have to say, I like it a lot. His face frowned slightly. That's an odd thing to say. Obviously, he's not as sure as I am. I left feeling good about it. I put Mike in touch with my office and arranged for a rental car, office, staff support, and all the details so he could start work immediately. We agreed to communicate often but not meet formally for 30 days when he would have an offer. In the meantime, I had to decide what to do with Sue. Obviously, she had lied to me. If she didn't admit it, we were in trouble. The first thing to do was to find out if she would tell the truth. I surprised Sue by entering the house a little after 11 o'clock. Wow, you're here early. What's up? I decided to take my wife out to lunch. The boys have a half day of school today. That's why I took the day off. I have to pick them up. Could you have lunch for 4? Sure, but I want to talk to you about Mike. She immediately went blushing. Damn, why couldn't I wait until we could talk to bring this up? Larry, that's a great suggestion. Let me give you a little warning. I haven't always been honest with you while we've been dating, you might say. But I promise you that everything I've said has been closer to the truth than not. I love Mike very much, but I've loved you more almost from the first time we met. I owe you an explanation for that and why I did what I did. Will you promise me that you'll listen to me? I smiled widely and visibly relaxed. She's going to tell me everything without even suggesting it. That's a great sign, and we're going to be fine. Of course, I wasn't so wrong about her. Sue, it sounds like this is exactly the kind of conversation I want to have. I'm looking forward to it. We got in the car and went to get the boys. With the 4 of us left, we went out for pizza, and what else? I temporarily disengaged myself from the conversation. My thoughts were wandering. What could she be telling me? How could I possibly believe this? She's the VP of sales for a reason. She can slip you shit and make you believe it not only smells good, but looks good too. Now she says, I lied, but for the greater good. It could be true, or it could be another lie for her own good. How can I tell? She's also smart. She has to know that if I catch her in a lie, she's in trouble, or our marriage is in trouble. So she has to come clean or pretend to come clean. Cynicism helps me in business, but is now the time to be cynical? We just got married. We're so right for each other that maybe she just fell in love with me and had to find a way to quietly let him down. That's the scenario you want to believe. That's what every sucker thinks. Larry, you're an idiot. You thought she gave you the right answer, and now you think it was a contrived answer. Cynicism is one thing. Indecision is another. Sue suggested that we wait until the boys were tucked in for the night. She wanted to meet in my room. I was doing nothing when she walked in. Would you like something to drink? She said uncertainly. I handed her my whiskey on the rocks. Oh, sorry, didn't notice. Let me get you started. I'm afraid this is going to be a little difficult. Sue, I promise you that your best chance of avoiding difficulty is honesty. Mike and I had an imperfect marriage. We hid it from ourselves and each other by working hard and succeeding in our business. A couple years ago, the casino started failing and Mike didn't handle it well. What do you mean he didn't handle it well? He tried to balance what I wanted, what the boys needed, and his job, and ended up doing none of it. Of course, he was right to choose those priorities. Not really. She fidgeted, trying to get comfortable. What was making her uncomfortable? You'd think it would, but that wasn't what we used to do. When things were good, he would tell me his problems and let me find what was best for me. When his world was falling apart, he withheld information and tried to figure out what was best for me. Why didn't you point this out to him? I pointed it out for over a year. He denied that he had any problems, denied that he was trying to determine what was best for me, and we secluded ourselves in the bedroom altogether. We found ways to be happy even when we were unhappy. The problem was that he kept us from facing the big problem, and it was consuming us more and more. A big problem? An imperfect marriage? The big problem was that we were compatible, but we never loved each other. Think about you and me. We're having this conversation, engaged with each other. Mike and I never did that. Was that before or after you and I met? Before, I was just getting to that point. That's the part I'm really not proud of. The first night I went to blow off steam, I thought it was completely innocent. I really convinced myself that I just needed some alone time and that's all I was looking for. And then I met you. Was that your first night out? It was in the sense that I wasn't forced to be away from home because of work, but decided to be alone. That encounter convinced me that I wanted to get to know you better, and the next time we saw each other, I took off my rings. Why, Sue? Can you tell me why you said your marriage was over? Larry, I don't know how to describe it because I don't have a consensus. On the one hand, I would say I want to be what Mike was and I want to help him get back to that. On the other hand, I'd say you've knocked me off my feet. I found the man I've always been looking for, and poor Mike has been sidelined in my life. She looks me straight in the eye. Her posture tells me she's telling the truth. After that night, I tried to make Mike realize we had to take matters into our own hands. I was promoted to vice president, and I thought it made sense to build all of our actions around that. I even suggested that we might have to live apart for a while so he could find the right job. But he just pondered. He and I were good together. Not great, but good. Plus, we'd been together for so long and we had boys. I didn't want to let that go. But I saw that you and I could potentially be together. I knew I would let it go. There's a lot packed into those words. Too much time had passed between the time she took off the rings and the actual divorce. Were you lying to me or to yourself? Were you telling us both what we wanted to hear while you were deciding the best course of action? Larry, I have to say it looks that way, but it was unconscious. Mike and I had a great relationship. He was the love of my life. Then he stopped being. It happened over the course of a few years, like I said. You can't just turn it on and off. I thought I was protecting him. Protecting him? He was lost. The hotel had been tampering with him for a year. First, they agreed to change his job and keep him on a tenth of what he was making in the good years. Then they backed off on that. He ended up trying to do a sales job he wasn't cut out for. He said he was reinventing himself, but he really wasn't. His heart was out of place. We were falling in love with each other, and I had to give him time to realize he was on the wrong path. I was letting him down gently. Until you fired him? He couldn't work 3 levels below me since we were going through a divorce. As harsh as it was, I did the kind thing, to get him to move on. And now what? Nothing has changed. We've grown to love each other. I was in no hurry to tell my husband. I hoped I could keep from hurting him before moving on. For years, whenever I had a problem, I consulted him. I had no one to point out the obvious. You can't end a marriage and not hurt someone. But I did end it. We are married now. My choice is obvious, even if I executed it poorly. You told me you didn't talk to him, and now you're telling me he would have been your counselor. We didn't talk. I said that if I wanted advice on how to fail my husband, my choice would be to talk to him. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to avoid talking to him all these months. Words couldn't change anything. I told him. I'm sorry I avoided it. We looked at each other, not assessing where we were, but rather assessing that everything had already been decided. She's right. She should have told him sooner, and I don't think the delay matters. What matters is that she told him. I reached for her and we hugged and then kissed. The physical act would show that I accepted her words. After all, it might be true. She really does love me. At least for now. There's a reason they say love is blind. The facts are clear enough, and they point to Sue playing around with two men while she decides which one is better. But her story could be true, and that would be better for me. Love requires trust. Common sense says trust but verify. Sooner or later, I have to stop weighing both sides. Am I in or am I out? It's been a month. Mike wanted to be left alone, and I left him alone. I couldn't wait to give him a chance to develop his thoughts. During that time, I contacted almost 100 people I did business with to tease this new idea. I'm good at teasing. Almost every one of them wanted to call again. My home life was very good. I left that alone too. Sue and I enjoyed life in a way that I could never even come close to with Jane. The fact that we were both in sales allowed us to support each other, offer advice, and best of all, genuinely enjoy each other's successes. Our passionate discussions often led to passion in the bedroom. Persuading the vice president of sales to do something out of the ordinary would be very appealing. But she didn't really need to be talked into anything. She usually brought it up on her own. One place I didn't do well was in establishing a relationship with her sons. Don't get me wrong, they are great boys. Maybe it's because they are boys, but they seem to prefer their father's company. Sue came to me one Saturday morning after Mike picked up the boys. Larry, I need to have a serious talk with you. That sounds ominous. No, not really. Although I really want to hear your advice and I'm afraid of what you might think. Oh, so it's not ominous? Let's go sit in your office. Sue has a habit of taking difficult topics in my office. It's as if she thinks if I'm more relaxed, I'll be more receptive. She may be right. We sat down and she got right to the point. I talked to Mike about boys. You can see that they prefer to be with him. Sue, you've seen me. I do my best to make them comfortable with me. I have to say, they are wonderful kids. I think we're making progress. Yes. In a way, that's part of the problem. If they were to list their favorite people, Mike would be unequivocally number 1, with you in the top 10. And me? Maybe in the top 50. They see me as the bitch who ruined their family. They're just boys. Give them time. You're a good mom. Maybe, maybe not. Here's what I think. The boys prefer Mike. The boys need to live here. What if we switch houses with Mike? Are you sure you don't want me and Mike to switch places? What? No. I didn't even think about it. I was afraid you'd think I was a terrible mother. After all, that's what my sons do. She began to cry. Women cry. Some cry a lot. I had never seen Sue shed a single tear. I reached over and hugged her. She was shaking, upset beyond belief. What's the matter? I'm ambitious. I work as hard as anyone else. What kind of mother does that? When her own boys prefer their father, who wants to just give them up. Will you cast me aside because I can't hold my own sons? She sobbed. Sue, one of the first things I liked about you was your ability to see things for what they are and balance your personal and professional life. Your ambition isn't bad and it's not going to change. You want the best for your boys. Someone who is a problem solver can see the best solution in what you have proposed. Sue visibly calmed down. I thought I could have it all. I can't stand it if I end up losing you too. Tell me you understand. I understand. I really do. It cost you a lot of effort to say your boys are better off with their father. I think they are. We're in this together. And if we never break that, we'll be fine. We were still in an embrace, but she relaxed. We were at peace. I called Mike and suggested we switch. He was over the moon. He surprised me by saying he wanted me to come over to his apartment on Wednesday and see what he had prepared. He wanted to start at 8 a.m. Ugh, these workaholics are always too eager to get down to business as soon as possible. As I pulled up to my once-and-future apartment, I decided not to pull into the garage. Today, it was Mike's residence. I walked over and knocked on the front door. It felt strange knocking on what was and would be my own home. Mike walked quickly to the door. He was ready to go. The door opened and he began his speech. I have several sketches, including a few that I made myself. I didn't want to give one person enough information to show what I was planning. There is nothing like what I'm going to show you anywhere else. You will be thrilled. Lord help me, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and without any introduction he's getting worked up. I need to slow him down. Hi to you too. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Sure, I'd like some coffee if that's okay with you. Mike laughed a deep and powerful laugh. I'm so worked up. I haven't slept in 36 hours to be sure. He ran a flat palm in front of his face, from his eyes to his chin. Then, oh, hey Larry, come on in, how are you? Can I get you something to drink? He stepped away and returned with 2 cups of coffee. Larry, I want to start by saying that our cities are dying out because they're dirty, noisy, unsafe, too expensive, and they have bad schools. People fled to the suburbs for quiet, grass, lawns, safety, and good schools for their kids. Now they have a terrible commute to work, driving an hour to see a theater or eat at the best restaurants, but they still think that's what the American dream is all about. Sure, so what? I smiled. I knew he wanted to continue. My tone was playful, not demeaning. First, let me describe my background. When my hotel was falling apart, I asked myself, how is the city different from everything we provided at the hotel? One thing that came to my mind is that in the city, services are regulated, but very loosely. We, on the other hand, have the ability to customize many things so that they are run by the owners of our complex. Okay, what does that mean? We've left too much to the government. I'm not saying this as a political statement, but as a practical one. Education, security, and everything else. The government's role is terrible. Worse, they blame us for their failures. We had standards in the hotel, the stores were independent, but operated to my standards. We should be the same. No wonder you're delighted. You've reinvented civilization. Larry toned down the sarcasm. It's simple. Everything I recommend already exists and is in use. The difference is that we're doing it for the public, not to the public. Everyone pays for the services. Everyone benefits from them. They are privately run. If they make a profit, they prosper. If not, they cease to exist. He walked over to a large blueprint of the parcel of land I was about to purchase. It showed 5 square blocks surrounded by a wall. It had 2 gates, one on the north wall and one on the east wall. These were the only 2 roads that exited the walled area. All others ended within a couple hundred feet of the wall. Mike began his explanation. This area is unique. It's an adult playground built around 2 huge casino hotels. The casinos are 4 blocks apart in the northeast and southwest corners of the space. There is a block around the perimeter, most of which will be demolished. There will be a park around our little village in town. Mike went on to describe the walled village within the city. All traffic within the walls will be driven by driverless cars, which can be private or shared. Casinos, hotels will be converted into condominiums. Many of the surrounding buildings will also be converted to condominiums. Family-style restaurants are envisioned for families of working parents. He was right. It was simple, possible, and most importantly, sellable. I was fascinated that automobiles existed to run the city without a driver. His scheme was so well thought out. A person could own his own car that only his family could use. A person could own his own car, giving him priority in line, and also provide that car to others. A person could pay more per mile and get priority in line even if they did not own a car. A person could pay the minimum amount but still have to wait longer for a car and possibly ride in the same car. When not in use, the cars were returned to the shared garage for cleaning, charging, and maintenance. Driving was simplified because all the cars were driverless. Mike, I have a million questions. What does walled off mean? We still need to work out the details, but 20 to 25,000 people will live here. We have to provide reasons for them to come and live here. The first reason is security. There will be no regular vehicular access to our village. Groceries, mail, and such will be delivered by carrier pigeons. Mike walked over to one of the drawings. The southwest corner is for carriers like FedEx, UPS, and the U.S. Post Office. Entrance is via a ramp to an area under the village. Parcels are sorted and most are sent home in a car that takes the resident home. It should be an interesting stunt. We're working on it, but it's not that complicated. People in the village will be given an identification card. They can also use an app. When you want to leave the house, you send a car. Depending on how you arrange with the car service, the car will arrive within a few minutes. While you are out of the house, you are notified that you have packages, giving you an approximate time when you will be home. You decide you need groceries, you use the app to order what you want, and they'll be waiting for your car at home too. How can this be done? Why isn't anyone doing it now? We're too spread out. People own cars and need them to travel long distances. We're living in the past. I don't think we like it much, but that's the American dream until someone shows people a new dream. Visitors? Mike walked over to another blueprint and said, "There's a visitor parking lot in the northwest corner. There will be several multi-level parking lots, depending on where you're going in the village." What about the schools? It sounded to me like people were leaving for the suburbs because the city schools were so bad. We will have private schools for all residents. Part of the reason to come to this new city will be safety and schools. How will it be paid for? Contributions, fees, taxes, whatever we call them. We will incorporate the town and proceed from there. Instead of paying taxes to defaulting governments, we'll use businesses for efficiency. Mike, that's great. I can't believe the details you put together in a month. We're going to renegotiate the contract immediately. We'll need to figure out how to set up the city to generate revenue as quickly as possible. Mike is excited. He has a well-developed concept. There are tons of details to work out, but this project is what he was meant to do. He's found his element. I figured our meeting had gone well enough that he could give me some honest personal information. So I asked, "What do you think about the change of location?" He laughed and, if I may say so, perked up even more. "Larry, I have to say that a few months ago the end of my life came. I lost my job, then my wife, my kids, and my house. My self-respect had dried up, and I was about to take a dead-end job that would drown me in mediocrity. Christmas changed everything. Home, then work, now my boys. And soon your ex? God, I hope not. When I think she snuck out on me, hired me for a position where I was worthless, and then fired me to score points with her superiors, she's a cold bitch. I'm sorry, she's your wife, and I wish you well, but if I were you, I'd be looking for betrayal. Mike, let me ask you, have you ever known Sue to cry? Is she the kind of person who might cry in certain circumstances? Of course. Say someone dropped an anvil on her foot. Well, if it was dropped from some distance, she'd probably cry. Why do you ask? When she asked me about the light switch in the house, she cried because I might have thought she was a bad mother. Larry, be careful. She destroyed her home to find another man. Her kids are getting in the way of her having a good time, so she's chasing them away too. Do you think the tears show she cares? No, I think not, or I wouldn't be asking. I don't want to call you a sucker, but get your head out of your ass. She made a bid, and now that 2 future draft picks have gone to another team, the deal is done. I know you're probably right, but she's a good fit for me. I've been pining for the love of my life for nothing. I knew I would never find another, but instead I found the opposite of my lost love. We fit together. Even a month ago, I didn't think I could say this, but you both have my blessings. I sincerely hope everything works out for you. I hope you don't have any interruptions. She's shown she knows how to bargain. I decided not to argue with him. We spent another 2 hours going into the details he had worked out. When we were done, I was on my way to share the exciting news with Sue. On the way, I was immersed in reflection. He was right about the tears, but I hoped it didn't matter. Sue was like me. She loved battles and victories. Now she and I are insecure about getting to know each other. I think she's afraid that I see her as a woman who will leave me if I get in trouble. I feel like we have something deeper. So for now, as they say in New Orleans, laissez les bons temps rouler. Let the good times roll. Why am I worrying? Why am I getting myself worked up? He's not going to give me straight answers. I'm with his wife. She chose me because we fit together. We're not like her and Mike. She really wants to be with me. Sure, it was a step up, but it was a step up for me. It was a step away from Mike. He just doesn't see it yet. Sorry, Mike, I've been thinking. And she's too young to be alone. How do we get on and make some money along the way? I've been thinking about that. We start by making the place safe, walling it off. First, we'll tear it down and plant trees and saplings for parkland. Then we will start creating condominium buildings. When we get far enough along, we can start selling condos. I don't know what far enough means. That's your job. Then there's infrastructure, I asked. Infrastructure? We'll need to buy, maintain, and operate a private car system. He immediately replied, No, the car system will be owned by private individuals and some entrepreneurs. We would like at least a couple to compete with each other. If the system is owned by the public, we'll all share the risk. With private ownership, the owner takes the risk and gets the reward. Think of a driverless cab. What about grocery stores, dry cleaners, restaurants, and so on and so forth? The old casino is being turned into a shopping center. It can have all that stuff in it. We'll be leasing that space. Pretty standard stuff. It should go easily, and it could also start providing early cash flow. Oh, but it's not standard, at least not all of it. Consider this. Mr. and Mrs. Resident have 2 children. They live in an apartment above the old casino. Mr. is a stockbroker and works outside the city limits. Mrs. is a travel agent and works from home. Their 2 children are in 2nd and 4th grades. Today, they never go to a restaurant. By the time you get the kids in the car, drive, find parking, and get to the restaurant, it's already bedlam. What they can count on in this new city is this. The school drops the kids off at the children's condominium entrance. Most of the children are picked up by various daycare workers. Some go to the transportation stop and wait to be taken home. Mrs. Resident drops the children off at daycare 3 days a week. She can work later, and this allows her to get clients on the West Coast. Mr. calls and says he will be home at 6:30 p.m. Mrs. calls the family restaurant and orders dinner for 6:45. At 6:20, Mrs. gets a car that takes her to the entrance nearest the daycare center. She picks up the children, and they all drive to the restaurant. Mr. has a car. He drives it to the parking lot on the perimeter of the inner city, locks it, and the driverless car takes him to the entrance nearest the restaurant. Everyone arrives around 6:30 p.m., sits down, says hello, talks about their day for a few minutes while he drinks a martini and she drinks a V&T, then dinner is served. All 4 of us head home at 7 o'clock. Are we going to be able to do all that? It'll be hard not to. People don't take their kids with them because of the hassle. Now, for 2 working parents, eating out will be less of a hassle than eating at a restaurant. No groceries, no cooking, no cleanup. The kids won't be bothered because there is minimal time involved. It's simple. Also, since a lot of them go there on the way home, the menu can be simple. Meatloaf, PB&J, hamburgers, hot dogs, and it will keep costs down. I don't know how long we talked, but for every question I asked, he had at least the concept of an answer. I don't remember ever getting such a high from discussing business issues. I wanted to celebrate with Sue. While I called her, Mike brought drinks for him and me. Sue, put on some nice clothes and make a reservation for 8 p.m. We're going to celebrate. Mike was coming back into the room and I saw how drained his face was. Holy shit. There really is a big hole in this partnership. Sue, hold on a minute. I put my hand on my phone and asked if Mike wanted to join us for dinner. It was crazy, but I figured it would be more polite that way. Well, if by we you mean you and the serial killer, then sure. If by us, however, you mean my wife, then you must be kidding. I held up my hand for him to pause. Sue, I'll be home around 7. See you then. Bye. I disconnected the call. What a day. There would be at least 20 different developments in this project. There's a fortune to be made from this. My euphoria was only drowned out by the fact that my partner's ex-wife had made it impossible for him to have a relationship with my current wife. The fact that these two were the same person meant that trouble lurked, but who knows where? Perhaps because he wants to lull me into a false sense of security. When the project is up and running and I can't afford to lose it, he'll trigger it and take her back. No, that's not going to happen. That's paranoia. Maybe we'll have a slow launch. While I'm underground all day, every day she'll find herself a different Mr. right now. That's paranoia. That's enough. I have to get out of the game. I love her, and she's my wife, who, by definition, I trust. Or not. I can't be haunted by the fear that she's looking for an upgrade, and I'm only temporarily fulfilling my role. Whether Sue was getting ready to go out or planning a seduction, it was hard to tell which. As it was, she could make the dead rise, or at least some of them. I saw it as an opportunity. We loved French food and wine. We made reservations at Maison de Vieux Car, a restaurant that served French and Cajun cuisine. The food was great. Even better, the conversation was encouraging. As we left, we summed it up. Larry, I've never in my life seen a man so excited and nervous at the same time. What's the matter? I looked at her and forced myself to smile. Sue, I'm trying to trust you absolutely. It's hard. She threw her head back and laughed. Difficult? I'd say impossible. I wish there was something I could do or say, but there clearly isn't. I should have hastened the end of my marriage. But come to think of it, I dissolved it after all. What can I do now? Well, I'm sorry. I meant to say that was a rhetorical question. I can live every day to prove that we're a team. I'm sorry Mike lost it. I'm sorry that I decided I couldn't stand his discouragement and moved on. But I did. Now that we're married, I want to prove daily what you want to know. Unfortunately, there is no other alternative. We hugged and said that as long as we were faithful to each other, neither her past nor my past mattered. It would work. Mike and I began to have a turning point. We made a pact. Sue was his past and my future. Her name never came up. While we were negotiating, Mike said our project would make us very rich. Great wealth would keep Sue from looking for her next Mr. Right Now. I asked him, am I broke? She'd be gone as fast as she'd find the next Mr. Right Now. I like Mike. I really do. But in this case, I think he's embittered. He thinks his ex-wife is fickle because she left him and is now with me. I know she found a better man and is with me now. I'm not going to be paranoid and wonder if she's going to leave. We're on our way to a fantastic future. Larry, let me ask you, when she talks to you, does she look you in the eye or does she look down? What's your point? We've avoided the subject of Sue for too long. You told me once that you wished us both well. I tell you how well we're doing and you come at me like Larry. What's the matter? I said I wish you well, and I meant it. But the truth is, you don't stand a chance in hell. You love her. She loves her. There are clearly not enough people on your side in your marriage. I can tell you firsthand, this woman is capable of punching you in the face. When we were having problems, I'd start freaking out because she'd disappear for the weekend or not come home or something. The next thing you know, we'd be in bed, on the landing, under the bushes or whatever. And soon I'd be so relaxed I couldn't remember what the hell was bothering me. I'm sorry she decided she loved me, but she did. You need to get over it. He stared at me as if I needed to come to terms with the fact that the sun rises in the east every morning. Okay, I have a counterproposal. You say you've met your true love, and I think you have a vampire sitting around your neck. If I entertain your wife for the next 10 days, will you agree that I'm right? Of course. Not so fast, I'll need your help. You want her? Get her. I'm not participating. I don't want to watch. I don't know what you need, but count me out. Not so fast. Then he explained. I listened. I agreed. It was a good plan. It seemed a little transparent to me, but if that's what it took, we'd give it a try. As I drove home, I prepared myself. Mike's plan was too obvious in my opinion, but for it to have a real chance, I had to go through with it. I pushed myself to the point of a fit of rage. I walked through the door. Sue heard it close and headed in my direction, smiling broadly and greeting me warmly as usual. What a bastard! I almost shouted. A hearty hello to you too, dear. Which bastard do you mean? That asshole you were married to. He ruined me. Are you a part of that? Larry, take your time. First explain to me how Mike ruined you. Yesterday, if you remember, I told you to watch out for him, and you were his best buddy. Do you remember that? I was so enamored with his great ideas that I brought him in as a full partner. He retained the rights to his ideas. Now he holds all the cards, and he wants me out because he hates me. I'm totally screwed. What am I going to do? Sue came over and put her arm around me. We'll work it out. Don't worry. As long as we're together, you can't lose. I really don't know how she can hold me and at the same time loosen my belt and pull my pants down. I do know how she can change my outlook after I've pulled my pants down, though. After just a couple hours, I was sure that life was good. 5 days passed. During that time, Mike and I never met once. I was sitting in my home office. I got a text message. 11:30 MBR. I smiled. That son of a bitch was right. I looked at my watch. There was plenty of time. I got in my car and drove to Mike's house, parking out front. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, quietly opening it with the key I still had. I walked up the stairs. I heard familiar sounds. I walked up to the master bedroom. Mike was kneeling behind my wife, ass up and face down. Her moans and the sheets clenched into fists made me wonder if my technique was that good. She was screaming, but her cry was muffled by her face in the pillow, and yet it was clear she was saying, "Give it to me, Mike. I missed you so much." The alarm clock on the bedside table showed 11:30. Mike looked over his shoulder, saw me, and smiled. I'm almost done. Do you want to try it with a whore, or are we going to go through those rooms? Sue twitched. She heard him. She jerked and tried to pull away, but Mike held her firmly by the hips. Larry, I can explain. I'm sure you can. The problem is, Mike can too. He explains that you're an unprincipled slut. He bet he could sleep within 10 days if I told him he had the upper hand in our partnership. Whatever your explanation is, his is clearly better. By the way, Mike, I hope you're not going to rub it in that it only took 5. I'll be downstairs in the office. When you're both in decent shape, we can talk downstairs. I heard movement upstairs. It seemed the shower in the master and guest bedrooms were being used at the same time. I suspect I was keeping the showers from being used together. Mike came down first and joined me in what used to be my office. He smiled. You timed your entrance well. I was done and she wasn't. She started babbling at me as soon as you started down the stairs. I told her that whatever she wanted to say, she could say to both of us. Mike, you know, all things considered, I wish things had turned out differently. She and I are really good together. Even though I knew everything, I was more than sad. Well, you're new to being dumped by her. You'll feel differently after a while. We were chatting about our project and then Sue showed up. She was dressed but not wearing makeup, and her hair was still damp and gathered in a ponytail. Mike and I sat on either side of the room, and she could only look at one of us. She turned her back to me. Mike, I knew we were supposed to be together. As good as Larry and I are, you and I have all this wonderful history and two beautiful boys. She paused, and I could see her shoulders shaking. But when she spoke again, her voice broke with tears. Give me another chance. I came running when... Sue stopped because Mike was staring at the ceiling. I knew where this was going, even if Sue didn't know it. Mike, why are you looking up? Because of the crying and sobbing, I figured an anvil must have fallen from the ceiling. I didn't. Sue was clearly puzzled. Now it was my turn to interrupt her. Sue, I said, and she turned fully around to look at me. Mike thinks that if you wanted to appear sincere, you wouldn't resort to tears. Although I have to say, you're pretty good at them. Mike spoke behind her back, causing her to turn around again. Masterful, but all in vain. We're going for another combination in our accommodations. You can go back to the condo. Larry will live here. I decided it was fun to spin her around and continue the conversation. Well, living here is a strong word. I'll have you serviced in a couple days. Then we'll start figuring out who gets what and who lives with who. I thank you for pulling me out of my depression. It was fun while it lasted. Now I thank you for leaving. I could see the gears grinding in her head, trying to figure out if there was any way to pull this off. She shrugged and, seeing no alternative, smiled, looked at Mike and said, I really screwed up. I lost faith in you. Then she turned to me. You really screwed up. You've lost faith in me. That woman knows how to sell, I'll tell you, said Mike, grinning. Are you buying? I smiled back. Been there, done that. She shrugged. Mike, I admit I was stupid to lose faith in you. When you asked, I really thought you wanted me back. And even though I knew Larry and I could have a great life, I wanted to correct that mistake. She turned to me. Larry, we had it all. I am what you needed, and I would never have lost my first love again, but you had to throw me away. I wish you both well. You don't know what you're losing? She walked out of our lives. I looked at Mike. What a great partnership we're going to have. We complement each other so well in business, and we both saved each other from a failed marriage to a mercantile whore. Admittedly, it was the same mercantile whore, and we both used adultery as a method, but it worked. He laughed with me. In his eyes, however, I saw sadness. Obviously, her words had hurt him, and he wasn't sure if leaving her was more right than bringing her back. Poor guy. How could he buy that shit? And why did I feel the same way? The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.